Well, now we've come to the part in the series about transparency, which is one of my favorite aspects and also my students too. And transparency is the illusion that one color is lying on top of another, and where they cross, you get a third see-through color. You can read more about transparency in my book, lots of examples, some quilts made by other quilters that are really amazing and interesting. So there are two kinds of transparency: parent-child transparency and layered transparency. Now, parent-child is a term that Judy Warren-Bladen came up with, and I took a class from her years ago in transparency, and if you get the opportunity to take a class from her, go do it, because she is really, really great at this, and I learned so much. Parent-child transparency has as much to do with value as anything else. Remember, we said value does all of the work and color gets all of the credit. Well, value is really important in transparency. So here is a parent-child transparency of one color, violet, almost a blue violet. And you can see that there's a light parent running vertically, a dark parent running horizontally, and where they cross in the middle is the child, in medium in value. So you have light, medium, and dark values. Here's another example of value and color transparency. We have a lighter yellow-green, a darker blue-green, and in the center, the child is a combination of both those colors and also a combination of the two values. So value and color can be used in transparency. This example brings in a third aspect, and this is where it really gets interesting and a lot of fun. The light parent running vertically is yellow with some blue, green, and red and orange in it. The dark parent running horizontally is a dark blue-green, and in the center you see a fabric that is medium in value and has all the colors from each parent. But there's something else happening here that's just wonderful and amazing. By rotating the child square, I was able to get a design flow through from the light parent through the child and back into the light parent again. So you're really working not just with value and not just with color, but also with pattern or design lines. And it makes it so much more convincing. Here's another example, and I lucked out on this because I happen to have these two fabrics. This is a Hoffman and so is the center fabric, and they were just in different colorways. So the yellow-orange in each one is the same color. And that's something to keep in mind when you're working with transparency. You want to match your colors. You know, we talk a lot about in quilting, don't be matchy-matchy. Well, this is the time to be matchy-matchy, because if the colors aren't right, you don't get that illusion. You don't fool the eye. The other thing is intensity must be consistent too. If you have two dull parents, you can't have a bright child. They have to be the same level of intensity, either lower or higher or somewhere in between, but consistent through all the fabrics. I actually had a man argue with me about this and say that those are just two fabrics, one laid on top of the other, and I thought that was so interesting. I said, well, actually, I made that block, so I would know. I also had a student in one of my classes. She's a friend who's an artist, actually a paper artist, and she took my class on transparency, and she raised her hand at one point early on, and she said, Christine, I wanted to ask you where you get these colors that you can see through. She was totally fooled, and that made my day. So here's another. These two are not in my book because I was working mostly with brighter values for the quilt that's in the book. It's called Galaxy. That's the parent-child project in my book. But here we have a light parent, a dark parent, and the child. The child is a leaf pattern, but it's still convincing because you can see that in the child is the yellow-green from the light parent and the blue from the dark parent. And in this case, again, they were the same, from the same company, a K-facet stripe and a K-facet shot cotton. So you get a really, identical color of blue. And of course, the leaf print doesn't really make sense coming from this light parent, but you can see the dappling in the light parent and then some dappling in the leaf design. In this version, I have the light parent with dots. The dark parent is a dark green, and in the center fabric, the child, you see both the parent colors and you see the dot pattern from the light parent. And that brings up the point that it's really, really important to have some connection between the colors in the child and the colors in the parent. So if you have a child fabric that has white in it and neither parent has the white, It's just not going to read as transparent. So that is parent-child transparency. Now we come to layered transparency. Now these are just color studies. They're just cut and paste, so they're not actually sewn. Layered transparency is the illusion that there's a shape that's darker or lighter hovering over the background. So in this case, my eye is fooled into thinking that this is a lighter square of plexiglass, of glass, of something frosted glass, hovering over these darker pieces in the background. So of course it's not true, but you get this great sense of layering. And when I talked about value, you might remember that I talked about how convincing and how satisfying it is to have this sense of layering or depth. And all I'm really working with here are value and intensity. So we have dark values in the outer pieces, lighter values in the center, and they're lighter value versions of the darker fabrics, so that each one relates to the darker fabric. And they're very similar intensity. This yellow green is a little bit more intense, but still it works as a transparency. Here's another example where everything's a bit darker. So the darker value background pieces are darker. The center pieces are more medium in value, so you still get the sense of layering, but it's a much richer, deeper sense, whereas this block to me is kind of ethereal and light and airy looking. These are made using my Luminaria pattern, which I've used for lots of different things. You can check that out on my website. Then back here again, I've used the Luminaria pattern to create a layered transparency. Now there's a lot of pattern in these pieces, but I think it works because of the value gradations. So in each block, there are 3 units that are dark and medium. Dark on the outside, medium on the inside. Then there's a 4th unit that's medium on the outside, light on the inside. So you're making a step up from darker and medium to medium and light to create that sensation that there's layering. So you have some fun lessons to work on this time, color studies. You're going to start by making this simple 9-patch parent-child transparency, just using light, medium, and dark values. And I would suggest that you work with only one color to make it simple. Then I'd like you to do it again where you bring color and design into the mix so that your child has 2 colors, preferably not many more than 2, but 2 are best, and some interesting design lines, and then you find the logical parents to go with that child. And then I'd like you to do a layered transparency, and this one's all about value, and it's so much fun because when it works it really clicks, and it's also very simple. You're just cutting and pasting. So that is it for transparency. I hope I've excited and inspired you because it's one of my favorite things to do with color, and I'm always thinking about it and always working on new ideas. See you next time.